All right. Thank you for joining us for coming together, activating cultural competency in your organization. I'm Latoya Drake, the Barren County Cooperative Extension Service Agent for Family and Consumer Science. That is a long title, a very long title, but I'm glad to have this job. I have been in service for much of my life. Can you guys hear me okay? Everybody good? I had started working at 14 in food service, but then got into the people service jobs in college and undergrad when I worked as a residential coordinator, counselor for Maryhurst, if you guys have heard of that, in Louisville. And I continue that work until this day. A variety of jobs, including substance abuse counselor, targeted case manager, and more recently, service coordinator for LifeSkills. So I was really honored and humbled to do this and have this opportunity as someone who's worked for LifeSkills and has been in this field for a while. So I've met a lot of good people working in this field, and I'm really thankful to have them a part of this panel today. I have Dr. Creda, Mr. Ron Butler, Latoya Whitlock, Dr. Christy Branham, and Monica Hines, and I'm really thankful to have them today, and thankful that LifeSkills initiated this conversation. Emily Boston reached out to me and wanted to make sure that we had a really good conversation, and I'm so thankful for this opportunity and glad to do this. Let's see here. I really wanted this opportunity because throughout my career in service, I've met a lot of really good people. And that being said, well-meaning people can be culturally insensitive at times. So when I worked at one of the places, I won't mention that place, you might know this place. When I worked there, I had a coworker who was speaking about someone, and he said Oriental. And I made sure to point out that that was a rug and not a person, and not to use that, because even though that might have been an okay thing to say in the past, that cultural sensitivity, cultural competencies change as time goes on. And those are going to be some of the things that we talk about today. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay, as we get started, I want you to head over to this website. You can go to www.menti.com and push in the code. You can scan the QR code over there with your smartphone, or you can just push the link. But I want you to go over to that website and answer that question.
Somebody do that. Oh, go to that website.
And if everybody can mute themselves, that'd be greatly appreciated. You can see my screen, but where are my results? Why are they not coming up? I have to send those to you on email. That's not working for me. Well, you get the drift. Let's try it one more time. Oh, here we go. There we go. Technology. So what do you think of when you hear the term cultural competency? I really like this word cloud. That is so neat. Awareness of differences. The big one was awareness. Relating to others, cultural beliefs. So super neat. Thank you guys for that insight. All right, let's check this out and see what some more folks think.
When I think of the term cultural competency, I think of being aware of not only my culture, but having awareness of other cultures as well.
Cultural competency to me is about acknowledging and honoring differences, not only in a coworker or a patient's culture, but more importantly, in one's own culture.
To me, cultural competency means to have the ability to recognize and be aware of people's differences, and in spite of those differences, be accepting and respectful to all.
Working in an environment where I can respect the beliefs, traditions, and customs of others.
I believe that cultural competence is actually a critical ingredient of what we term person-centered care. Asking questions regarding a person's cultural experiences, needs, and their preferences, understanding the pervasive impact of shame and stigma in seeking mental health services, and helping in a way that's comfortable and acceptable to the individual and his or her family.
Being culturally competent is acknowledging and understanding that people may be different, but should be treated with equality and respect. Culture is who we are. We should embrace it with pride and dignity.
Soy colombiana y soy Rutgers UPHC.
Moi, c'est haïtien. Moi, c'est Rutgers UPHC.
Ana Mastrella, Ana Rutgers UPHC.
I am African American.
I really love how they're introducing themselves with their native language and just really being who they are in that video. And everybody has really good insight about what cultural competency is. And thinking about cultural competency, it's important that we think about the demographics of our areas and our communities. So I checked out the 2019 Bowling Green Census population estimates, and I really appreciated the insight into Bowling Green. Bowling Green is growing more and more culturally diverse as the world is. You know, the United States has always been culturally diverse, from Black folks to Indigenous Americans to Japanese Americans to Irish Americans. And now we're able to have contact with folks from around the world due to, you know, social media and blogs and chat rooms and in our communities. Just check out Bowling Green. Bowling Green's about 74% white, 13% Black, and you guys can read all of this and have been reading it. Just getting really diverse. In comparison to the rest of Kentucky, Bowling Green is pretty diverse. Now, my old Kentucky home of Glasgow, Kentucky, is also growing in diversity. The city, the town, is more diverse than my county. So my town, Glasgow, where I live, is 7.6% or almost 8% Black and 5.3% Hispanic. So a bunch of different folks living, coming together. And this coming together can cause issues sometimes if we're not sensitive and competent to other people's culture. It's important that we increase our proficiency in these skills of being cultural competency as our world becomes more diverse. Okay. So before we begin this panel conversation, let's define a few terms really quickly. So we've got culture. And culture is simply the sharing of a pattern of thinking, feeling, reacting, and problem solving. You must consider culture in its historical, social, political, and economic context. And it's a pattern of learned beliefs, values, and behaviors that are shared within a group. It includes language, styles of communication, practices, customs, and views on roles and relationships. What is cultural intelligence? Something important to understand before we begin this panel discussion and conversation. Cultural intelligence is simply the ability to interpret the stranger's behavior in the way that that stranger's friends would. So just to be able to relate to someone on a friendly level would be cultural intelligence. And the title of this presentation, Cultural Competency. It focuses on sensitivity to cross-cultural differences and the ability to adapt to other cultural environments. It is the appropriateness and effectiveness of one's behavior in an alien environment, and the acquisition and maintenance of cultural specific skills for practical reasons, including to function effectively within a new cultural context and to interact effectively with people from different cultural backgrounds. I really appreciated my dear friend, Dr. Nicole Brazil, who's helping man the chat box for me. She's a UK specialist, and Heather Hayden, also a UK specialist with Cooperative Extension Service, for their discussions. Dr. B this morning, she gave me a really simple definition for cultural competency. And it's just working with folks from different backgrounds in ways that don't hurt them. So how can you work with the people from different backgrounds in ways that don't hurt them or offend them in their culture? Let's check this out.
Oh, you're so pretty for a black girl. Oh, she has a Jew nose. Oh, your hair would look so good if it was straight. Jews are so cheap. Why are you so cheap? Do you speak good English?
How are you an Iraqi Jew?
I think the person saying microaggression kind of doesn't really think about it. This person who said it was my friend, and I was astonished that they would say something like that. You don't want to make a big deal about it, but then it's also you just said something that offended me, so I feel like I should speak up. Because they're micro, because they're very subtle, they're small, you feel like you don't have a reason to be upset. You're overreacting, and people even can make you feel that way when you bring it up. They're like, oh, you can't take a joke. You're making too big of a deal of this. Why are you overreacting? Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke. Chill out. Say oh no, I actually love black people. I love people of color. They try to just minimize the situation. If someone feels hurt by a microaggression, it shouldn't just be pushed to the side. It definitely has negative impacts and leads to people disliking who they actually are. Those kinds of subtle offensive comments can build up over time, and they can have a deep psychological effect, and they can make you feel bad, and they can make you doubt yourself.
We try to just use jokes to make things less awkward or ease social experiences, but it is important because you need to be aware of what you're saying and who you're speaking to.
Think of what you say and how it can affect the person you're saying it to.
Sorry guys, I'm still getting used to this new technology. So the children always say it best, from the mouth of babes, right? They had really good examples and really good insight. Despite our world being more globalized and us interacting with folks from different cultures, breakdowns in intercultural communication still persist. In 2013, y'all, the FBI reported that there were 6,000 incidences of hate crime in the United States. And I'm sure that has only increased in recent years. Discrimination and biases have serious and sometimes deathly consequences. Recent issues of even police brutality and the subsequent death of Black folks seems to be influenced by stereotypes and prejudices and negative racial biases. Victims often suffer from biases in less visible ways. And that's when you hear the term microaggressions, which the children spoke of so eloquently. These are regular or daily subtle acts of bias that may be consciously or unconsciously expressed. And they have a cumulative effect on folks. So it's there's a really good video. It had curse words, so I couldn't show you guys. It had the big curse words. If you want to check out microaggressions and mosquito bites, it just talks about how some folks don't get bit by mosquitoes all the time, but others get bit all the time. And having those microaggressive mosquito bites in your life is really frustrating and causes a lot of rage within. And so you might be working with folks in your profession that are dealing with that rage, and that's just something to be aware of. And these microaggressions not only affect the victim of them, they also affect the person who is being aggressive. I was reading, the new research says that it affects their cortisol and stress levels for the aggressor. And it affects everyone who is around the victim and work environments. It doesn't make them good places to be in. But there's the basic information before we get to the good part, the conversation. And I'm so thankful to have these people here to be a part of this panel discussion and to give us some storytelling insight about cultural competency so that we may better understand this concept. So we will start with Dr. Cree, just because she was first. Dr. Dye.
Hey, everybody. What's today? Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, y'all. So I am Dr. Lucretia Cree Dye. Most people call me Cree. And I am here. I want to say I'm here. I work at WKU, but I'm actually here representing Lily B and all my other ancestors and grandmamas and aunties and everybody else who brought me up to be great, y'all. So that's who I'm representing as I come here. In regards to cultural competency and how I would define it and how I discuss it, I think that as individuals, for us, first of all, one thing we have to know is that every single household is a different culture. Y'all recognize that? Yes? Every household is a different culture. So us as humans, to recognize that we should constantly be in a continual, active, and internal process that includes investigating our attitudes, our memories, our beliefs, and our behaviors towards other individuals from other cultures, especially, and every household is a different culture, y'all, with the desire to value their unique and amazing selves, right? And we want to recognize that we just need to mind our kind, meaning that we all are different kinds in the sense of some people are tall, some people are short, right? Lighter skin, dark skin, just minding your kind, respecting that everybody is different, celebrating yourself while celebrating others, right? We recognize that we have other siblings in this country, especially in the US. It's not just white people here, y'all, okay? That's my description of cultural competency or cultural awareness, y'all.
Thank you for that insight as always. Whoever would like to go next in our panel, can feel free to chime in.
I'll go next. So I'm Ron Butler. I'm here representing Journey Pier of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm a targeted case manager here. My definition of cultural competency has to do with acknowledgement that there are differences between us all. And when we become willing to acknowledge other people's differences, we become open. And when we become open, then we can become aware, which means we are willing to be educated about those differences. And then I think at that point, we have a choice. And you know, when you have the choice of either respecting or not respecting someone's differences, that's where we find, you know, our moral compass. And so if we get to a point to where we can respect each other's differences, then we can work together.
Thank you for that insight. Who's up next? Dr. Branham, you want to go?
Hello, I'm Dr. Christy Branham, and I'm an associate professor of gender and women's studies at the University of Western Kentucky University. And for me, cultural competency is a ongoing, active process. So it's a verb, and it involves constantly acknowledging and recognizing the humanity of others.
Thank you. To the point. Appreciate you with that concise point message. Monica, would you like to share with us?
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Monica Hines, and I also work at Western Kentucky University. I am the director of the Training Resource Center in the social work department. And cultural competency in social work, I'm going to be completely honest with you all, that's when I really began to understand what cultural competency meant in the 90s. Just because of my background of living in Bowling Green my entire life, and, you know, just being oblivious to things until I finally went to college. But in cultural competency, it's a requirement. It's something that if you don't understand it, you need to understand it. It goes back to us all having differences. We are all different. we have to increase our awareness of our own personal backgrounds, our assumptions, our stereotypes, our biases. We have to figure all that out and examine ourselves and have a reality check within ourselves first before we can go and help others. And so being in a helping profession and working in child welfare for 13 and a half years before I came to Western, where I've been there for 5, that's something that I took great pride in, and understanding that not everyone's going to be like me, but that's okay, and that I can learn about them. And so in cultural competency, we have to break down those barriers and navigate through the differences and help our clients or our friends or whoever overcome the obstacles and the barriers and allow them to obtain any issues that they may have. And so cultural competency is really, number one, reality check for yourself and becoming self-aware, and then also being able to help others. And I'll be quiet because, I could go for days and days and days.
No, thank you for that insight. I really appreciate it. All right, Ms. Whitlock, what do you got to tell us about this topic?
I'm Latoya Whitlock. I am from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm the executive director and a co-founder of Decode Project. We are a literacy program. Our gift is teaching kids to read. My definition of cultural competency is essentially an intentional and explicit internal look at what culture means to you, what values we live out, and then also understanding that we have all subscribed to a social contract, which is our culture and our cultural norms. And oftentimes, especially in our country, definitely in our state, that contract has embedded implicit bias, it has embedded white supremacy. And so intentional cultural competency means embracing other cultures and being thoughtful in decision-making and policy-making, and embracing every difference that comes from others. And it doesn't mean necessarily green. I think that when we talk about cultural competence, it sounds like a kumbaya, let's all come to the table. There are times when I learn things about other cultures that make me uncomfortable, and that's okay. And I still get to embrace and honor a different culture, even if that means there's a level of discomfort for me. And so I think that true cultural competency is being able to sit with difference and still find value in others and their culture, and also with our own.
Thank y'all for that insight. We'll just continue in that order. Dr. Dodd, you have some insight about this next question for us.
So I want to make sure I have my questions right here. Tell us about a moment when you saw someone. Oh, you have it right there too. Y'all, I'm so air. Y'all know I'll be all over the place. I think I'm doing good over here. You already took care of me, girl.
I so appreciate your air. Thank you.
Tell us about a moment when you saw something being culturally incompetent. That question specifically, and how did that make you feel? Were you able to do anything about it? So, oh my gosh, you all.
See that to fix. Anytime you do something, you always see the thing that's wrong when you're presenting it. But there's that meme.
So funny, Latoya. Okay, y'all. All right, Latoya, I get distracted easy.
Yeah, sorry. I do too.
Okay, so being a person that prepares individuals to become therapists, y'all, let's just sit with that. Let's think about that for a minute. So I am a professor, and my work is to support and prepare individuals to go and sit with other beings, to go sit and be present with other beings during some of their hardest times of their life. Y'all with me? So when we think about going and sitting with another, I have seen it so often, not just from those that are training to be therapists, but also all these colleagues of mine who are training individuals to go be, they're also training individuals to be therapists, where there is an incompetency, where there's just an assumption that everything should show up the way that my world is. You all get what I'm saying? Right? You get what I'm saying? So if they see one way, here's an example. I had a PhD colleague working with one of our students of color who was training to be a therapist. And we were talking about when in a session, the way we communicate. So one of the students was he was a black male. He is a black male, but he's not with us any longer. So this colleague wanted him to speak in a softer, more gentler way. And she's a white female, and this is what she's asking of him. Could you just, in a softer, more gentler way, ask the questions and do the reflection of feeling and the reflection of content? But could you please soften when you do that? Look at your face, Latoya.
Which Latoya?
So in this process, I said, I'd like for you to explain that. What does that mean for him to soften? She says, well, like you, Dr. Dye, sometimes you need to soften a little more. And I said, what does that mean? She says, because, you know, you're just louder and more aggressive. And see, like me, I'm gentle and soft. And she says, sometimes I get kind of worried. And I said, so you fear me? I said, you fear that I'm going to physically attack? She says, yes. And he needs to soften. Come on, y'all. Some people need to sit with themselves before they can sit with another. And so when we talk about these microaggressions and some of these things that come out, it's a whole lot of sitting that we need to do before we go and sit with other people where we don't even see them as human beings that are worthy. Like their existence is a problem to us, or the way that they show up, because he didn't show up the way that she thought he should show up, right? And I don't think he should show up the way she wanted him to soften, right? He should show up as himself, right? And it should be a problem. It shouldn't be interpreted as he's aggressive or he's louder and he attacks when he says his words, right? So I'll be quiet now. I know I got it. Y'all feel that? Y'all feel that? You see how I put my hand here, calm me down? Okay, I'll be quiet, y'all.
Yes, thank you, always. I appreciate your words. All right, Mr. Ron, what do you have for us?
So honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, you know, if I'm really thinking about a time where I experienced some cultural incompetency, as an African American male, I've experienced that multiple times myself. Just in the sense of like having to be more aware of how I show up, because you know, automatically assuming that, you know, I'm going to take something of yours, or I'm going to be somewhat of a threat to you because I'm an African American male. And then, you know, I see several people on here who know me and who've worked with me before. I'm not a small guy, so even to that being in itself, like, you know, I've had multiple people at times say, you know, I was so intimidated by you when I first met you. And it's like, why? You didn't even meet me though. You didn't meet me. You just saw me, you know? And so it's just, you know, taking, you know, I've learned to take those as opportunities to educate people and to just, you know, say, hey, you know, maybe next time, you know, if you see, just because you see my size and you see my color, why is that automatically associated with a threat or aggression or something that's going to be a negative experience, you know? And, you know, usually that, you know, that the whole tone and the whole vibe of that interaction has changed around, but it's the initial, you know, before you even decided to really meet me, you had predetermined, or you had really, you know, already prejudged that, oh, he's going to be aggressive, or, oh, he's going to be, you know, he's going to come off really mean or really shrewd. And it's like, no, like, honestly, this guy right here is a big teddy bear, to be honest with you. Really just love to laugh and have a good time. So that's my experience. Honestly, I've experienced more of the cultural incompetencies myself. So
thank you for sharing. All right, Dr. Branham, what do you have to add?
Well, I have been thinking about this question for a few days now, and I have a lot of examples. Some end up horrifically. Others, you know, are just little accidents. I think that as someone like me who was raised, I was raised Southern racist. So that's one of the reasons that I say, you know, that cultural competency is an act, it's an action, and it's something that has to constantly be, I mean, if you're genuine about it, you know, if you're really interested in acknowledging the humanity of others around you, then it's an activity that you have to constantly be involved in. I remember when I first started at WKU, I was in a training session for faculty, and it was all white faculty except for one Black faculty member who was African. And about 30 minutes into the meeting, I realized that every time the Black faculty member began speaking, I interrupted her. And so that, you know, I wasn't interrupting other people. I was only interrupting the one Black faculty member, my colleague, when she spoke. And I was terribly chagrined when I realized what I was doing. And of course I stopped. But I also it had to be an action that I made within and inside me. Like I had to actively say, stop interrupting your colleague when she speaks, you know. So, and I also wanted to add that I appreciated what Latoya Whitlock said about cultural competency being hard work and working across differences as being work and hard work. And so, you know, as someone who was ingrained with racist beliefs from the time I was in the womb, it is hard work. But I follow particularly this quotation from an essay by Maria Lugones, a philosopher, and Elizabeth Spellman, and they're talking about building coalitions across differences, and I use this for myself all the time. They say, they're speaking to white people, white feminists here, and they say, so you need to learn to become unintrusive, unimportant, patient to the point of tears, while at the same time open to learning any possible lessons. So that idea of patience to the point of tears, like I really try to feel that in my heart. I was also raised in a Christian family, so the messages of Christ, you know, really contradicted the messages of racism that I received as I was growing up. And my mom, who was a strong woman of God, was also racist. And she used to ask all the time, can God command us to love someone? You know, the commandment, I command you to love one another. And I really think when she was going through, she passed away from Alzheimer's, and she relived her whole life during the 50s and 60s where she witnessed, you know, up close and personal, the civil unrest of that time. And she really went through a reckoning of that. So I just think if you're raised with Christian background, and you're also raised racist, then you probably have some cognitive dissonance in your head. And I just think it really takes a lot of work. I like to think that when my sister-in-law committed suicide, she went to the emergency room at the hospital that morning asking for help. And they turned her away. She was a plus-size African-American woman and poor. And they saw a walking stereotype, and they turned her away, and she went home and she killed herself and died in front of her children while they were on the phone to my partner screaming, you know, trying to revive their mother. And I like to think that if those individuals in the emergency room had some training in cultural competency, then maybe Shell would still be alive today. Maybe she would see her grandchildren. She has grandchildren now. And so there's a legacy there also that I think is really important. And this is something that Dr. Dye brought up in her introduction. You know, I mean, there's a real legacy here. So it's not just important for us as individuals, but it's important for the generations that come after us. I told you, I have good examples. I have examples that are really heartbreaking of culture, you know, and I have examples that are kind of funny. So I tell my students, you know, I mean, we're talking about life and death here. So it is serious business.
It is. Thank you for sharing so openly those serious and heart-wrenching examples. Monica, what do you have to add?
Okay, sorry, I had to get myself off of mute. Bless my heart. Great dialogue. Absolutely, I have witnessed, I have been a part of as a supervisor dealing with those who are culturally incompetent. I've had to actually reprimand people for being culturally incompetent. One of the biggest ones that comes to me is working in child welfare. There are several times that, you know, we work with very diverse backgrounds, and, you know, sometimes that means you may have to bring in an interpreter, a language line, or, you know, things of that nature, or you're dealing with people who are in poverty, and poverty is not a choice. And I don't think that people understand that, or certain individuals don't understand that. And having to have those talks with them about cultural competency and how that all plays in together, and even just to the point of, you know, when we go into certain homes, you have to take off your shoes. If not, then you're not going to get the respect that you need in order to complete an investigation. You know, and it's just about being competent in all the things that you do. And if you don't know about it, then you need to research it. You just don't stop researching after you get out of school. You have to continue to research and continue on throughout your entire life to understand what's going on. Also with microaggressions, I mean, I have dealt with that since the time I was born. I've dealt with the color of my skin. I have dealt with the way that I talk, because I went to PWIs, including when from elementary school on up, and children not liking me for the clothes that I had on, for the cars that my parents drove, you know, not being able to have friends, and being very saddened because I didn't understand at the time that my parents, I was thankful and blessed to have a 2-parent household. However, at the same point, my parents worked hard for what they got, and I was ashamed, you know, for the things that I had because of the way people made me feel. So it's so important that we understand where people come from, and, you know, we have issues within our own races as well. So when we say things to people, just like the children said in their videos, it hurts, you know, and so we have to be reminded of that. And even to the point that one time I was doing an investigation, I know I'm going all over the place, but I don't know the correct names of these, but so I make up my own names. But I had went to the Grand Poobah's of the KKK's house, did not know it. And pretty much when I got back to the office, everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And that was like, "Do not let that N-word back in my house or I will kill her." So, you know, it's things like that that we need to know, because I don't want to go back to his house if he doesn't like me, because I think I'm a pretty cool girl. You know, there's things that people, based on the color of your skin, you're always judged. And so even when Dr. Dye talked about, you know, the one, you know, being loud, I am loud by nature. I was a cheerleader for 13 and a half years and was a cheerleading coach for 5.5 years. I'm loud, but I can't help it. Like, that's just me. And when I get excited, I'm times 10 loud. Can't help it. And so people judge you before they even know you. And that's very unfortunate, but it's also, you need to understand cultures, and just as in the African American culture, a lot of times some of the things that we do is based on what we know. So if you just get to know the different cultures and where they come from, I promise you will learn so much more. So what I'm saying is, don't judge a book by its cover. I'm muting myself.
You're fine. Thank you for that insight. I really appreciate it. Okay, Latoya, what do you have to add?
Sure. So, much like you, Latoya, I have worked in the nonprofit and social service industry my entire professional career. And so I was a former school counselor. I served on the admissions team, and we had a bright student come in. He, participated in the class. His report cards looked great. He tested really well, had wonderful references, which is weird because he's a kid. Why does he need references? And I happened to have talked to him during lunch, just in passing, and there was a conversation happening in the office at the end of the school day when he left, and it was about his hair. And so he had really new baby locks, and his father also had locks. And there was a discussion by the administration on him being a bright student, and he had such a positive day and experience, but what are we going to do about that hair? And so at the time, I just minded my business and listened. And then fortunately, I had a colleague who was an older white woman who said, I don't know that is appropriate, and I don't know what that has to do with his academic career. And so, Latoya, she yelled for me. And so, of course, I peered around the door. Hello. What is your thought on this? And they described the situation. And so my first thought was, tell me what that means to you. And so, in having them process what their bias was, you had just given him a glowing report and talked about how brilliant he and his family were. And the one thing that would be the reason for him to be denied access to the school is his hairstyle or the lack of a haircut. What does it mean to you? And so the response was, it looks unkept. How is he going to be able to manage that if he, goes swimming, or is that even good hygiene? And so I answered all of the questions, but then I also finished with saying, the last thing was, he's so smart. How is he ever going to get a job with that hair? And so my response was, if his resume and his experience and his proven success gets him the interview and even makes the offer, then the problem is no longer his. The problem is the organization that he's looking to work for. That's a personal problem. That's a systemic problem. And quite honestly, I would recommend that he not work for that organization if the one thing that would hold him back would be his hair. And I even went on to explain that when I interviewed for that very position as a counselor, I straightened my hair because I thought you may in fact think that, and I regret that because it helps you perpetuate the narrative. And so the conversation ended as amicably as possible, but I hope that it was food for thought for the administration, but then also for everyone else who was in the room, because it could have just said, oh my God, you're being racist. Do you hear yourself? I don't know that would have been received well. And I think that part of what we can do about raising cultural competence for everyone, including ourselves, is think about the end goal. If the end goal is, I wanted her to have a full understanding / go inward and question her own thoughts and beliefs about that student, about that hairstyle, whatever. Beating on the table, having the conversation with her probably wasn't going to be helpful. And so for the sake of that child and for myself, it was more important to find the approach that I thought she may be able to listen to. I'm not saying that I always agree with that. I'm saying that that's what I decided to do in that particular situation. And real quickly, I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Branham for mentioning that story. But then also when you talked about the quote, patience to the point of tears, I feel like that is cultural competence, because welcome to the party. that is what Black people, people who have disabilities, anyone with difference, I feel like that's the jagged little pill that kind of gets shaved off from the time that you're a child, is you're going to have to be patient with other people's ignorance about you. And so I feel like having that embrace, like I felt your pain and frustration and your resilience in quoting that. But I also feel like if we all practice a little bit more of that, then we would be at a better place than where we see ourselves right now. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Latoya, I appreciate that. When you speak about hair for job interviews, I think I've straightened my hair for every job interview that I've had. It's heat damage, which is upsetting. Our next question, examples of cultural competent organizations and people and what makes them successful in their intercultural communication. Dr. Dot, what do you have for us? Who is successful at communicating?
So I may have to go to the end of the line on this, because I've been looking at that question, and I want to give some examples of some culturally competent organizations or people, because my first mind goes to organizations and to think about the organizations that most of us here are a part of. I don't think that I've been a part of an organization that is culturally competent, because to me, when you talk about, I think that everybody's into lip service and talking about being culturally competent. But the day we see cultural competence is the day we see people from varied backgrounds. The day we see people of color, people with disabilities, more people that identify as LGBTQIA, we will see it all. And that's when, it's like putting our mouth where our money is. That's when it'll be. And I don't know, I so desperately want to see organizations and systems express cultural competence. But I can't say that I've seen it. So I said I was going to pass it. I'm going to be quiet now so I can just pass.
To add to what you said, those are really good points. But in my experiences too, there's working poor culture on boards and in different seats. There's because I come from a place of poverty, and I don't see myself expressed in different boards and leadership roles in the seats that I sit in. Mr. Ron, what do you have to add to this?
I would have to almost piggyback that. I would say that I've worked with some people that are within organizations that are, the people themselves are culturally competent, but I can't speak and say that I know the whole organization or the organization as a whole is very competent. I agree that I don't see very many people or, that look like me or just of a color period on a lot of boards. I do know that, my experiences that I've had with the organizations that I've worked for, the people that I've worked for and worked with have been very pleasant. I like to think supervisors that I've had, I'll just say it. The very first opportunity I ever had working in this helping profession was at a substance abuse treatment center, and the gentleman took a chance on me when nobody else was taking a chance on me, and so. I like to think, there's more people out there like him, and I would hope there would be, in the future, more people in positions that can empower people of color and people of other cultures and nationalities. They would take that as an opportunity to, grow the company in that way, because I feel like we all have special and unique backgrounds and different things that, can propel an organization and move an organization forward. But if nobody is willing to open that door and create that or give that opportunity to those people, we'll never see a full organization as culturally competent.
I agree with you, Ron. My first experience too is on this call. I saw my old boss, shout out to Laura Gaines on this call. She always respected me as a person and gave me a chance when I moved back to Kentucky when I lived out of state with LifeSkills. So there's lots of different culturally competent folks who are taking action in the verb of cultural competency. To reframe this question for our next respondent, Dr. Branham, where she is, let's see. Is there any agency that stands out of making it more of a priority than others, maybe? Where is Dr.
Well, like many, like the other participants on the panel, I was thinking about this question and not coming up with answers. I think the scholar sociologist Patricia Hill Collins talks about 3 different dimensions of oppression and experience. You know, the institutional, the symbolic, and the individual. And so, like many of the panelists before me have said, is cultural competency really happens on individual levels, person to person, right? It's recognizing, for me, actively recognizing the humanity of the other person. I was thinking of the Kentucky Foundation for Women here in Kentucky, which works very hard, has worked very hard to diversify the board and to be culturally aware and to make opportunities available to all women in Kentucky. I don't know, you know, that hasn't always been successful for them, but they have continued to struggle through that. I know that the National Women's Studies Association has worked very hard to incorporate multiple voices and faces to purposefully elect people of color to positions of power in the organization and voices to lift up those voices. And the Third Wave Foundation, which is an organization based out of New York, has also worked very hard to reach out and to create a diverse organization. I worked 10 years at Disney World, which may not be necessarily a culturally competent organization, but it's a world within itself. And so, you know, it continues its mission with a whole bunch of different people working together to make that magic, you know, the Disney magic happen. So I guess those would be some examples of organizations. But again, like many of the other panelists, I guess I'm sort of suspicious of institutions and organizations because they are really the arm of our white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society. So, you know, just throw out some feminism in there.
I agree. I have trust issues with organizations, but have seen a lot of organizations do really decent work. I'm on a board myself. It's a voter engagement board, and we have co-directors, a Black woman and a white male, who are the same role. And I think that is how leadership in the future should look. And I think that's a good example. Monica, what do you have to add?
I could echo everything that everyone's saying. I have really good mentors, outstanding mentors. Dr. Dye probably doesn't know this, but I see her as a mentor. I love her. However, I would still have to agree with everything that everyone is saying. Everything that I have accomplished, everything that I have done, everywhere that I have been, every job opportunity that I have been able to be a part of, the board of directors that I sit on, I either feel like I'm the token child, or, you know, or I'm the token child. Let's just put it out there. And B, it's always either me or a few others. There's not a lot of mixture of different races, backgrounds, ethnicities, anything. And that's what I would love to see. How do we get there? It takes a united front. However, I see some making great strides to do so, but a lot of it, again, is a lot of lip service. Until you see, and I mean, and to be honest, a lot of us are just tired of talking. We're ready for somebody else to get up there and do the work, because that's all we've talked about, you know. However, I do serve on committees that are amazing and outstanding, and I hope that I'm making a difference, because that's why we do what we do, right? But at the same point, it's like, when it gets to the top, or is it going to be voted back down? So.
Thank you for that. Latoya, what do you have to add?
So I love Nina's reframing of the question, because it does give me something else to think about. Because when you sent this question, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I got nothing on this one. But what I can say is, even when we talk about prioritizing, and I hate to be the downer or seem negative at all, but I think when we prioritize something, what that means is we say this happens first, and that means the other things underneath are not going to be as urgent. And so have I seen organizations be deliberate in prioritizing cultural competence? I still don't know if that's necessarily the case. And I think that that goes with policy. So it goes with your fundamentals, your foundation. We at Decode Project were intentional about saying that a third of our board has to either be a West Louisville resident, a parent, or a person of color. So that if you were joining the board, you would know, oh, this is a priority for them. Another way that we've been intentional about trying to prioritize being cross-culturally competent is by saying anti-racist, anti-bias on all of our marketing materials and on our website, so that if you are turned off by that kind of language, great, you don't really want to be engaged with us. And we need your dollars, but we're not going to change our language to suit you. And that was hard. That was a sacrifice, because we also knew there were grantors and there were private foundations and individual donors who saw that, who may see that language and be turned off by it. But because it was our priority, we were willing to take that risk. So I think that people are taking baby steps by having conversations and doing panels and having book clubs and reading books. And we've even had our program evolve from being just a book club to being, this is the book, and then here are the action steps. Because it's easy to have more information. You can have all the information in the world, but with that cognitive dissonance, if you don't, what did John Lewis say? You need to pray and move your feet. Being still and holding all this information doesn't move the needle in the effort of being cross-culturally competent. And then someone mentioned earlier about including folks with disability, not disabilities, with different abilities into the conversation. Did we lose it? Okay.
My life together with technology and YouTube.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm listening.
It's okay. With different abilities into the conversation, I think the best way I've heard that is the curb cut effect. And so for some people may know this, but the cut in the curb when you're crossing the street was originally like a big deal because enough people had to raise enough money and talk to politicians and really have enough pressure, political pressure, to cut an indentation in a curb so that people who were in wheelchairs can easily move across the street independently. But then not only helps folks who are in wheelchairs, but it helps someone who's on crutches. It helps parents who are pushing kids in strollers. It helps elderly people, injured people, a person with a dog, a small biker. And so the curb cut effect means that we're going to do this thing because it celebrates and supports this one group. But the right thing typically has a ripple effect and has an impact on everyone involved. And so I think that prioritizing intercultural communication and cross-cultural competence as an organization means that you're willing to take some risks and even some blowback, and happily even, because it's the right thing to do. And that is a way to prove that this is, in fact, a priority for you.
Mhm. That was good insight. Thank you, Latoya. There's some in the chat box. There's some examples of some organizations doing some good work. Somebody shouted out one that I have taken part of, Emerge Kentucky. They do some really great work. I mentioned Kentucky Civic Engagement Table. That's an organization that I'm a part of. And then there's some more mentioned in the chat, so check that out. We've got one more question to get through, and then hopefully we can maybe take one or two from the chat box too. Our final question, Dr. Dye, is can you share your best memory of how your professional life and organization have benefited from cultural competency or successful intercultural communication?
So thinking about my professional life, you all, I just feel like we need to let people speak for themselves. And what do I mean by that? Whoever that people group, that person or people group belongs to, that's who needs to be at the table. And so, for example, I used to be a school counselor. And so working as a school counselor, often we want to make decisions about some of these children, especially if anybody here is an educator. You want to make decisions about some of these children that you have no idea of their environment, their background, or anything. You want to make decisions. But how can you make a decision? Here's one thing we used to do. Instead of us going in and preparing all of these like parent workshops or professional training or family workshops for the families to come in and to integrate the school and community relationship, instead of us thinking of what we should do, we invited them to come in. So you have almost this sense of action research constantly happening. And as a professional, if I want to go in and do anything with a people group, I should go to them and first ask what are the needs, instead of me coming in like a missionary saying that I need you to come to Jesus, when that ain't even probably what you need. You probably need some water on, right? So we see that a lot, where people will come in and bring what you think somebody needs. And the most important thing that I've been a part of and I've observed is when they bring those individuals to the table and ask what their needs are, instead of me coming in and saying what your needs are. So that, I think, is probably one of the most beautiful things I've seen. Now, let me make sure I make it clear. It does not happen that often. And even specifically when I talk about the local schools here, oh, so often they say that they want to have the back and support students of color, but yet, and I am a person who trains school counselors, yet there aren't any school counselors of color in any of the schools that I'm exposed to in this community. And then we hear things like, oh, nobody applied. That's a lie. And we hear that a lot when we talk about representation at the schools. That's a lie, because I'm training them. I know that they're applying. So just to say, when we talk about putting our mouth to action, and when we talk about action, we want the people who we want to work with, we need them at the table, right? So they can speak for themselves to say what they need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for making those really good points. To build off that point, in our community, I learned that in the Glasgow city school system, the city school system, 35% of the children there are children of color. And that is pretty big in a city, little country town like this. But that is not reflected in the teachers in the environment, because we are not empowering those kids to come back and teach. We're not empowering a diverse teacher. So that's just something to think about. Thank you for mentioning that.
So please let me jump in about that. Okay. When we talk about empowering students, we got to know about Brown versus Board. Once upon a time, it was a huge population of teachers, and that was cut. And then when we talk about empowering people to come back to be educators, if they don't see educators of color, it's not likely that they'll think that as a possibility. Mm-hmm. But why don't we see educators of color? A lot of times we have these white educators, white administrators who think that there's only so much pie. So they have a fear of, if we get more Black people in here, they're going to take our pie. It's enough pie for everybody. So when we talk about that, we got to make sure we look at the whole context and speak about it, because these babies do want to be teachers, but they don't see it as a possibility. Those associations are happening in their brains. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet now.
No, thank you for pointing that out. That's one reason that I went back into this job in the field that I'm in, because I wanted to be representative in my community, so that the little Black children and the brown children could see an educator who looked like me. So thank you for adding that. Mr. Ron, what do you have to add?
So I'm gonna take this to the substance abuse and treatment. You know, I can almost, when I first started working in this, I could almost count on both hands and feet, like how many African American people I saw who received substance abuse treatment. It is almost mind blowing when you think about the disparities between African Americans who come to treatment, or who are afforded the opportunity to come to treatment, because in this world, let's be real, like over half of the population or the clientele in the treatment center is coming from the court systems. And if we're looking at the court systems, we know that the numbers don't lie when we talk about African Americans or people of color being incarcerated on these astronomical numbers, but they're incarcerated on low level drug offenses, but then they can't go to treatment. They're not being afforded the opportunity to go to treatment. Like how is it possible that this group of people is not represented in the treatment world? Like, I'm not saying that I haven't seen African American people or people of color in treatment before, but the numbers are ridiculously low. And so for me, it's like, if we're talking about being an advocate or trying to show up to help, make a change and do things of that nature, I feel like that is kind of what I'm doing here. I feel like it's very important for me to meet these clients right where they are. And sometimes that means, understanding that they are less fortunate, understanding that they don't come in with a lot of financial resources. They don't come in with a lot of education at times. And so just understanding that all of those factors that come into play, they really need someone that looks like them, talks like them, that walks like them, to show them that, yes, you can change your life. Yes, you can do something. And no, it's not lame. No, it's not square. And it's actually an admirable thing to be able to acknowledge that you have a problem and you need to do something about it, and then get to a place to where no matter what, you're going to do something about it. And so that's kind of where I'm at in my professional career, and thinking about how can I advocate or make a difference. It's just, to me, it's mind blowing that I know for a fact that the clientele comes from court systems, but it's predominantly white and not people of color, and to me that just doesn't make sense. Why are they not afforded opportunities to come to treatment? And that may have more to do with our criminal justice system, but at the same time, I feel like if you're talking about substance abuse treatment and where the clientele is coming from, they go hand in hand, and somebody's got to make the bridge. And I know that I can't do it alone, but I feel like that, I could have a voice in it.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Branham, what do you have to add to this question?
This is a hard question. I guess I'm still thinking. I guess I have, most of my examples are from my individual in my relationships with individuals. So when I first saw this question, when you sent it to us in preparation for the panel, I just thought about some of the students I've worked with at WKU, and I had a student, I was his advisor for his whole career at WKU, and everything about us was different. He was a man, I'm a woman, he's heterosexual, I'm homosexual. He was in his 70s, and I wasn't, and he's African American, I'm white, so we had he had a prison record. He came back to school, so he was a complete non-traditional student. And he and I worked together, and when he graduated, I swear to you, when he graduated with his bachelor's degree, I said that I have accomplished everything that I was designed to accomplish in this world now, and I can just go pick out my grave, because that is the thing that we did together, he and I. And I mean, he struggled as well. He was taking gen ed classes with 18-year-olds, you know, so he and I, we worked on that. I mean, he was having cultural issues, you know, making that transition back into an undergraduate classroom, being an African-American man. And so we worked on those kinds of things together. He took women's studies classes, so that was, you know, all blowing his mind. And we wrestled with topics of abortion, and we worked on strategies, and I was just really, so for me, that was a really great moment of us sort of working through our differences to accomplish this really fantastic goal. And he's a leader in his community, you know, and cares for his family. And I just thought that was yeah, like I said, after he walked the stage, I was done forever.
Don't be done forever. I'm glad you
That's it.
Pick up and do something today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Monica, what do you have to add?
I just think that actually, when I was able to transition from my position from child welfare to actually working at Western, I was able to do more in my professional life. And I'm able to serve on boards, and I'm able to bring more awareness to others. And so I think that's my best memory and current memory is being able to be in part of the DEI committee, being able to be a part of ISEC, being able to be a part of all of these different organizations that I was not able to be a part of in my other job because I was on call 24/7. I was working all the time. I didn't have time for that. But now I'm able to be out in the community. I'm able to have a voice. I'm able to be a voice for those who are not able to have a voice or do not know how to advocate for themselves, and discussing those, the ways that they can't advocate for themselves. So I think that that's been my best memory, is because my current supervisors, I say supervisors because I have several, they allow me to do a lot of work, even though I'm not actually faculty. I'm kind of treated like faculty, and so I'm able to do service to the organization. I'm able to do service to the community, and those type of things. And so it brings great joy to me to be able to do things that I've always wanted to do. So I think that is the biggest thing. I provide CEUs for Western's social work department. I'm always trying to think of new ways to do things, and being able to think outside of the box is been the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So.
Yeah, you make a good point about the organizations that we work for being benefited from cultural competency. And I'm glad to work in my home county of Barren County as an extension agent. I'm the first Black extension agent. And I think that my county's benefited from my presence because I care about my county. I love my county. So that's a good point that you make there, Monica. So thank you. Latoya, your last ad for this last question.
So I had a couple of examples, and I'll be really fast because I don't want to take up too much time. So one of them is I worked for a residential facility for kiddos, and we would get them dressed and ready to go to school each day, and they went to school outside of the campus. And so a lot of the volunteers and people who donated hair products and lotions and potions, but many of them were generic.
Suave.
Yeah, suave, and many of the population were people of color. So the folks who were working, our colleagues would wash their hair every day. We would have to teach them, no, for the Black kids, you can't wash your hair every day. It'll tear their hair out and dry it out. So finally what we did after work, after hours, we sat down and had a braiding group where we all learned how to, Black, white, whatever in between. We learned how to braid. We learned how to oil scalp. We learned how to do lice checks for kids. And that was a beautiful experience because the behavior of the kids that we were serving was so different because they were thoroughly nurtured in a way that they understood and they felt good about themselves when they left the building to go out. And so I feel like that was one of the smaller things we did. And then we had the agency add to the needs list hair products and skincare products for a diverse population. The other example is a little bit different in that our current role at Decode Project, we partner with local colleges and teach future educators anti-racism training, anti-bias training, also structured literacy to teach kids to read. But what is beautiful, I believe, is that a lot of the students who are in our program, the college students who are in our program, have these really unique and meaningful relationships with the kids. It forces them to travel to a part of town that they may not necessarily go to, and it normalizes their relationship so that when they are sent to a Title I, they're not doing their time. They're already embedded in the community. They already have relationships with the families in the community, and they want to be at the school. They take pride in being at the school and watching it improve, because I know little Joey, and I've been knowing him for 2 years now. I remember when he didn't know how to read. I helped him learn to read. And I also was invited to the birthday party and the football camp celebration. And so I feel like those are really good examples of intercultural communication that is a stretch on everyone's end, but the end result is a positive outlook for the students or the people who are being served, but also a teachable moment for the people who are in service. So yeah, those are my two examples.
I love that we all benefit from diversity. Did we have any, I don't know if we have time for questions from the chat, because does anybody have anything else on the panel that they'd like to add before we wrap up?
So while we're looking at questions, seeing if there's any questions, it's about 4:17, by the way, sis. I just wanted to let you know. One thing that I wanted to say, you all, is that I truly believe that we all came here as love, and that we're just having a temporary deviation from love's perfection when we don't show up and look at every single human being as, some mama's baby, and just as this amazing soul. And really in my heart, I believe that everybody wants to do right by each other. And it's just sad that people have been socialized to only see themselves as valuable, or people like them as valuable. But I really believe in my heart, I have that hope and that belief that we all, want to do right by each other.
Thank you for that. You always have an eloquent way to say things that are just so touching. I just appreciate you so much. Here's some tips for how to develop more cultural competency skills that I gathered from some extension pubs from across the country. And the plug for extension is a valuable tool. There's 120 counties in Kentucky, and they all have an extension office with folks who do similar work that I am doing based on their own areas of expertise and their own interests. And I'm just so blessed to be in this job, to be able to serve my community creatively, and hope that you all were able to gain something out of this. So
Latoya, can I say one thing?
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too, make sure you check the chat box, because you guys had really great conversations and really great resources. What do you have to add?
I just wanted to say, and it's on the back of Dr. Dye, it is stifling to each of us individually to not know what is happening on the other side of the fence, right? So not only is it you have to learn about another culture, like, oh, why do I have to learn about someone else? Instead, think of it as I get to learn about someone else. All the opportunity, all the culture, all the music, all the food, all the ideologies that you get to know, you have a fuller, more enjoyable experience of the world when you open yourself up to what is happening on the other side of the fence. And so I just feel like I'm blessed that I get to be in mixed situations, even those I don't agree with. It's still information for me, and I have a need to know problem. So I like to know what other people are doing in their households and how they're living, just because I feel like it adds value to the way I see the world.
Really quick. I'll just say that crossing over to the other side of that fence can be very uncomfortable. But what I found to be very true is that when I'm uncomfortable, that's when I'm growing.
I got some points. Y'all have really blessed us. If you guys could just answer this next little evaluation, we'll see how we learned. Just give me some feedback for my impact for this program so that I can continue to provide similar programs that are helpful for our community. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you LifeSkills for initiating this, and thank you panelists for participating. I really appreciate all of you very, very much and have learned so much. We will wrap up with this. Let's see if we get some results.
And I went ahead, Latoya, I just wanted to let everybody know that I put the link in the chat box for that evaluation.
You did. You're the best.
Just a couple of questions.
Thank you, Dr. Brazil. Can I get back to the results?
Also, Latoya, you may want to mention that there are a number of resources embedded in the chat for starting points and next steps for people to read or listen to who want to continue to think about this and work on these.
Yes.
But people, there was a final question with somebody who asked, does the panel have any other great resources for them to start with?
Thank you, Dr. B. We all appreciate Dr. Nicole Brazil. Many folks from this area know her from her good works here. Thank you for all your help.
Latoya, this has been so wonderful. This is Heather Hayden.
Well, thank you for your help too. I appreciate it, Heather.
Of course. I just wanted to say one thing that you could do is you could download the chat text from Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it provides a recording of it, and you could send it out to everybody if folks want to see go back and check out the resources that were offered in the chat.
Awesome. I might have to get your help with doing that.
Sure, no problem. I'd be happy to do that.
I'm going to stop recording. Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for coming.